Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Hampton.
And this is Nate Drolet.
And together we form Tiger and Steve Williams.
Wow. It's not my day.
When was your day?
Oh, man. We went back through these. Hold on. I got one. I got a good one not too long ago. Well, by not too long ago, it was like 3 years ago, but I don't remember. So it's been a while since I've had a day.
Steve Williams was Tiger Woods' caddy through much of his reign as the top golfer in the world. And at the time, they were pretty good on the links. See what I did there?
Okay.
Yep. I'm mastering this shit. Yeah. And that's the duo I chose today because we are talking about our top pet peeve, biggest tactical errors we see made sport climbing. And to be fair, I don't go sport climbing anymore, so I don't see any errors being made sport climbing except for the people who are going sport climbing. That's not entirely true, but I'm going to say it regardless. And my biggest tactical error is people not following through with the logical links. So I've fallen into this trap myself a number of times. I've been kind of wooed into thinking I'm in send position when I'm not. Even when I thought I was this like tactical master, I had done all the links, you know. I've been wooed into that. And then something clicks and I'm like, oh, here's this link I didn't make. I make the link and then I send.
Yeah.
That's happened to me a number of times. And I see it regularly, especially from, actually probably more from like the 512 level sport climber is where I start seeing the biggest tactical errors. I feel like the sport climbers below that are making enough progress oftentimes that they can work through those tactical errors by getting better. But once people hit that 512 level, tactics start to matter a lot. And it's kind of at the time where people are really start to dig into their first projects, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where I see it manifesting.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take a step back. When you say logical links,
Yep.
how would you define that?
Essentially, I think when you're new to climbing and you look at a route, it looks like this one big thing, right? You start at the bottom, you go to the top. That's the rule.
Yeah.
And as you get a little more experienced, you start to be able to break the routes down into smaller sections. You know, call them whatever you want, break them down in terms of boulder problem grades or small route grades or whatever you want. But there are these kind of logical checkpoints, these smaller little sections of climbing within this big route. And actually then as you get more experienced and dig into it more, pay attention to it more, those links can really, or those sections can start to overlap into new sections. So it might be these 3 sections separated by 2 good rests.
Okay.
You know? Then you can go, oh, well, there's one from the bottom to the second rest. There's one from the first rest all the way to the top. There's one from the third hard move to the second rest, you know, and then there are all these links you can start seeing that start to make sense for you. And for me, the next logical link is just the one that's a little harder, or the one that you haven't done yet, whichever comes first. If you feel like you've done the links, then look for a harder link. It's a tricky game, right? Because we're always, unlike bouldering, we're always starting from the bottom of a sport climb.
Yeah. Oh,
You know.
but are you?
Well, I mean, most of the time, most of us are standing on the ground when we start a sport climb.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean, however, that we have to climb up to the place we want to start from.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean we have to red point up to the place we want to start from. So it gets a little trickier when people pull on, start climbing, feel good, and then they start thinking in their head, like, I should just go for it. I should just go for it. You know, this happens all the time, especially when it's like you're close. There's one or two links left you could do, but I'm feeling good now. I'm just gonna go for it.
I'll just go and see what happens, and I'll work out the links after I fall.
Yeah.
When you're flamed. Oh
Yeah, it's a dangerous place to be, and
what a trap.
And those last links to do are very often nearly as hard as doing the whole route.
Yeah.
Which makes it even tougher to convince yourself to, air quotes here, waste that energy that it's going to take to do that link.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really big one. Yeah, being like, I'll just give it a red point, go, fall, and then I'll worry about links after.
Yeah.
Because then you're tired. Like you've essentially also reduced the amount of times you can try that route that day. Because sometimes going up and doing links, you can save a lot of energy. If you say, I want to try and link bolt, let's say 3 to 7, you can go up bolt to bolt, bolt to 1, go to 2, go to 3, taking it each, saving energy, gun for the 3 to 7, and then you can come down from there if you work it out, do whatever you need. But if you go straight from the ground and try and gun for it all the way from the ground, let's say you fall at 5 because you're tired, or maybe there was a missed sequence that you didn't figure out yet. Suddenly you're like a little bit pumped. You're not going to be able to work the sequence out as well. Well, could you have done it from 3? You don't even know anymore, like, because you tried it from 1.
Right.
There's all these things like you didn't answer any questions.
Yeah.
You got greedy and it kind of bit you in the ass.
Do you think, this comes off of your question to me about what are logical links. Do you think that it's sort of a self-selecting thing in that when you're a new climber, you don't see the links at all? As you get a little better, you can start to see the links, and the next logical link is the next one you can see, right?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
And as you get better and better, ideally, and I think a little bit whether you want it to or not, you start to be able to see the different links that need to be made, sort of parallel to your abilities. You start to be able to see those things, parallel to the grade or level that you're climbing at. I'm curious. I'm not sure if, because there's not a really specific way to say, here is what the links are on any given, as a general rule across all sport routes. Do you think it's somewhat of a self-selecting thing what the next link is?
I do think that as you become more skilled, you'll see different links.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that said, I do think it's important to reach out and talk with other people about, especially people who have done the climb that you want to do, and ask, and just pay attention to what people are saying. Like if everyone's falling at the same spot, anytime, like there's a route in the red, what is it called? True Love.
Yeah.
One of those things where everyone seems to punt above the crux.
Right.
If everyone's falling there, is that punting?
Exactly.
Like, or is it just...
There might be a chapter in my book about this.
Yeah, like, it's like, literally every person I've ever talked to who didn't on-site the route fell after the crux.
Right.
And the breakdown of this route, generally speaking, is supposed to be like 12 plus, V8-ish, kind of funky, to, in air quotes, 10D.
Is that what people say?
Oh, people have told me this. Yeah, and I went up it, and I was like, man, I don't know if I fall on 10D this much, but this feels more like V5 to me.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I went and talked with a buddy about it afterwards, Daniel Breckner, and he was like, yeah. He's like, everyone's kind of full of shit, huh? Because he's like, you ever notice how literally everyone falls in that 510 section after the V8? I'm like, yeah. He's like, no, I think it's hard. And I was like, okay, cool. So that's a good example of paying attention to other people. And maybe it did feel like V10 right after, or 510 right after climbing V8, but it's hard and everyone falls there. So that is a necessary link that clearly a lot of advanced climbers oversaw. Like to them, they're like, oh, it's fine. It's whatever. And it's hard to also link a very succinct crux like that into the top when there's not much lead in climbing. So you're like, well, if I could just do the V8 to the top, I might as well do it from the ground.
Right.
There's a theme here. But yeah, I do think you get better at looking at links. And I think it's really important to watch other people too. There are a lot of, I'm always impressed by great sport climbers because they're not afraid to go for maybe what to me seems unintuitive for links.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're fine saying, hey, I'm going to go from 3 moves into the rock climb.
Yep.
Like I could reach up and slap their chalk bag as their belayer from where they're pulling on, and they're going to try and gun from there to the top.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
like, that seems weird. Just do the start. But they know themselves and they've seen the process well enough. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess you climb 515 and I don't. So seeing that, I think helps. It's one of those things, your intuition builds with time, but always look out and watch what better climbers do.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we've talked about on a lot of episodes in the past, but this is going to fundamentally look a little different than my gripe with bouldering, that you've already heard, in that, like I mentioned, you're standing on the ground most attempts and you can't just reach past the crux to start. You can't get a power spot through the crux move. But you can exercise things like going bolt to bolt, like you mentioned. You can climb this easy section or climb this first link and then go in direct and sit there for 15 minutes and, then try the next link. So you can do all of these, you can use all of these tactics to help you as long as you go in with a plan to begin with. Talk to your belayer about it. Have them not let you off the hook.
Ooh,
if your goal is to, I want to go from bolt 6 to the chains because I haven't done that link yet, and you get to bolt 6 and you're like, I'm feeling good, I'm going for it. Your belayer should be like, nope. If you make one more move, I'm pulling you off this rock climb.
Yeah.
Because chances are you're going to fall at bolt 8 or, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you've blown your attempt to make that link. Exactly the scenario you were talking about. So have that belayer hold you to it. I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. And I've drawn some diagrams for, this one and the bouldering episode that kind of show how this might look in practice over several sessions of bolt to bolting or doing shorter sections, lowering down and doing a different link. Play around with it. I think that's the best way to go about it. And I think it's a lot like the bouldering episode where if you're falling in the same spot over and over and over, it's probably a good idea to start looking for some big link you haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
The obvious ones we've talked about in tactics episodes in the past, but how low have you gotten to the chains from? Yeah. And how high have you gotten from the ground? Those are the two big ones. And if in an ideal world, if you can just keep making a new high point and a new low point, eventually, you're one bolt difference and you can just do the thing. That's not how it always breaks down. And you have to get a little more creative. And like you said, watch how other climbers are approaching the route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And first, I just think those are all like great points. There's one thing I would add that I don't think is used often enough, but you can also do reps on links.
Yep.
Like this is what I used to do back in the red, and I used to think red point cruxes were my superpower.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's just because, I don't know, I realized early on, like, if you go to the anchors and going to the, let's say the last 2 bolts are the red point crux. So you have a hard boulder down low, and then everyone falls in the last 2 bolts. I would just do the last 2 bolts on top rope 3 times every time I went to anchors.
Yeah.
So every time I went up the route, I would do that last section a total of 4 times. And I never fell in red point cruxes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, apparently I just, I have a mind of steel and all this. But really, it's just, I don't know, I just did it more.
Yeah. And I think, in a lot of cases, it's really important to not conserve all your energy. Like at the end of a session, do that big link that you've already done. Do it tired.
Mm-hmm.
Get up there. It's the end of your session. Your power's drained. Try the big link anyway. Learn to fight through it. It might show you a new area that you didn't think to include that's going to be troublesome for you when you are tired coming from the ground.
Yes. Yeah. Fatigue is a good teacher.
Yep.
Like especially in easier climbing terrain. That's why it works so well for red point cruxes.
Yep. And if you're a good intuitive climber, you might find some rests that you've never found because now all of a sudden you're forced into this section where you're a little tired and you're having to get into this big drop knee you never saw before to shake out or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Super important to play with all those links.
Mm-hmm.
What's yours?
All right. Mine, we've attempted to find a name for this. We've tried about 7 different things. The closest I think we've got is method of approach. So what I mean by this is how many different ways do you try rock climbs? This is on-sighting, flashing, second go sends, trying to send it in a day, maybe trying to send it in 3 to 5 sessions. Is this a season-long project? All of these different things.
Right.
What most people end up doing is they settle into 1 to 2.
Yep.
Maybe they've got like a lot of people like a second go send and maybe a project. And I think their second go sends tend to be a little bit on the comfier side.
Totally.
It's more like, oh, I'm going to project this 13C, but I'm going to second go this 12A.
Right. Something you maybe could have on-sighted.
Yes. Like I know a lot of amazing projectors who can see things through for seasons, who climb up to 13 plus, who are terrified of trying to on-site 11 plus rock climbing.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
They're just like, oh, well, that might blow my day. It's like, well, it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like to me, it's such a fun opportunity for growth too. Like I remember when I was breaking into 512 and I was like, okay, well, if I want, like there's this general rule of thumb that works shockingly well in rock climbing. That is whatever you on-site, like your on-site grade and your hard red point project grade should be 1 number grade apart.
Yeah.
It works really well.
It does.
It's just
it shocks me regularly how well it works.
Yeah. Like it's just kind of held true. So let's say if you want to consistently climb 12A, in my mind, I was like, well, if I can consistently on-site 11A, then that's the 1 number gap. That'll work. And same thing, like when I wanted to go to 12B, I was like, well, let's spend some time trying to, first it was like, I want to flash an 11B. So I'd have, my friend tell me whatever the beta was. And it's like, okay, let's on-site it. And then, and then it's like, oh, okay, like in my mind, I can now climb 12B. But I'd also mix in, like my favorite way to do it, I would start with on-siting because that was a good way just to have fun, see a lot of climbs. You do more pitches, more new things. You're seeing a lot more new movement, new styles, stuff like that. And then once I would get tired of that, I'd be like, well, I want to try something harder. So maybe then it's a second go sends. You're a little more tactical. And then you do that and you're like, oh, cool. I've leveled up a little bit from that on-siting, but I want something harder. So then it's okay. How hard can I climb something in a day?
Yep.
And then, it's like, oh, well, suddenly like I'm climbing, 12 minus in a day. Cool. Well, let's level that up. And then you just keep going. And for me, it would keep going until, okay, I've got a hard project. I've now tried this. I sent it after, let's say, 6 days of work, 7 days of work. And then for me, it's like, well, maybe I'll pick another one, or I'm going to go back to on-siting or I'll just mix these other days in. and it keeps things fresh. And you can learn so much from these different styles,
Yeah.
these different methods of approach. I'm going to keep saying it and hoping that sticks, because I still don't like the phrase, but we'll find something.
Yeah, if you have a better word for this, post it on the Instagram post about this
Yeah.
episode.
But this is what I see people drop the ball on a lot. They find
Yeah.
their comfort zone. Maybe that's going out and just day cragging, and they on-site or do an easy second go send, or maybe they only mega project. But it's rare that you see people really cover all the bases who don't also climb really well.
Yeah, it's really interesting too how much this can how it can become dogma for people. I hear so many people totally down projecting because for whatever reason they've decided that on-siting or doing things second or third try is the ultimate way to engage with rock climbing. And they're just projecting is stupid. I don't want to spend that much time on a route. It has nothing to teach me. I just do things quickly. Not true at all. It has a lot to teach you. And then I see projectors, like you said, really scared to try and on-site something much easier, and just never engage with it. I had a method that worked for me well up to a certain point, that I would reward myself for on-siting things with projects.
Ooh.
Where if I on-sited 12A, that meant that I could have a 12D project.
Oh,
it was always three letter grades was the span for me at the time. And once I on-sited 2 12As, I could have 2 12D projects. Once I on-sited 3 12As, 12D was open for me.
Oh.
And I could try as many as I wanted, sample whatever I wanted.
Interesting.
And that worked for me in the red and in climbing in the new a bit, up to about on-siting 12C or maybe even 12D. And then I was sort of running out of things to try because I had overlapped where I started.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I'm going to start on these bigger projects, the really hard things for me. And I'm going to have these mini projects. So I found ways to interact with a lot of them. Failed on-site attempts would essentially, not technically, I couldn't log it on my 8A this way, but it would essentially become a second go send some other day down the road, where I would go back up the route with the purpose of trying to send it next try.
Yeah. So technically you'd send it third go. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would be exercising it like a second go send. And then that led into the fun of, let's try some harder second go sends,
Yeah.
Almost always while also trying some big major project. But I really like playing at the ends of that spectrum of, if I'm projecting, I also want to be on-siting,
Yeah.
Just feels good to me.
It keeps you sharp.
It does.
Man, I love it. If I could only pick one, question. If you could only pick one method of approach, what would it be?
Bouldering. No, I'm just kidding.
Get out of here.
Off
with.
If I could only pick one method of approaching sport climbs, it would probably be, for me, mini projecting.
Oh, it's a good one. It's so fun.
Yeah. I think that would be it for me.
What would your ancillary one be? Let's say you spend 60% there and you get 30% on another.
I do really love on-siting. If I would never run out of routes to try an on-site, it would be on-site.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking in my head. Man, I think I might actually do the same. On-siting for me is just as fun as rock climbing gets.
It's so fun. It's so fun to be able to switch into that mode where you're just going for it. You've got no doubt in your mind that the next hold is good, that you're doing the thing. You're just executing these visions that you're having as you're doing it. It's so much fun.
Yeah. But yeah, mini projecting is fun. I guess I think I'd probably do the same. Let's say a mini project being a 3 to 5 day project and then on-siting. with the caveat that I never run out of on-sites.
Yeah. Why would you choose mini projecting over like mega proj?
I've never really enjoyed mega projecting.
Hmm.
I feel like I keep, as long as I do other things, I keep progressing with mini projects. And maybe I've just never found the right balance with big mega projects, but yeah, I've just never really loved them. Like I've seen things through and I've had big mega projects, but I don't know. I'm just a glutton for more rock climbing. It's probably why I like on-siting.
Yeah, same. I've done my time with a few mega projects, and I'm glad I've done my time with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I would be willing to invest that same amount of time and energy into the same sport climbs, partially because it requires other people
Oh yeah.
to be going and doing that thing with you. And that's a hard sell for a mega project, unless you have other people projecting at that same crag.
Yeah. I think I've also realized, like when I was younger, I guess I never thought there would be a limit on how many places I would be able to like go see and try routes I'd try.
Sure.
And so I was fine just being like, oh yeah, like I'll just spend a whole season trying this, or yeah, I always had this mentality of, oh, I'll get back to it. And I'm starting to realize, if I sit down and plan out my year, like, oh, here's the trips I can take. I'm like, man, if I want, like, I don't have infinite time. Like, so I think that also is something that appeals to me. Why mini projecting appeals more is, I have the ability to travel some, and I would much rather go see more things and, still get to sink my teeth into something hard, and that's going to keep me up at night, but not so much that it's going to keep me away from getting to experience new places or new routes.
Yeah, and I think if we look at the pros, the best sport climbers, if we look at Ondra and Segrist, say, they are very well versed at both on-siting and projecting at several different lengths.
Yeah.
Ondra will dig into major projects that are game-changing, that, break through some ceiling. And then he'll also do 15C in 4 tries,
Yeah. And that's something that really blows me away about these high-level climbers is, Ondra will go on-site a 14B and a 13D as part of his warm-up to go try a high-level project.
Right.
Man, I got, I know people who are like trying to send their first 12D and they're like, well, I don't want to try and on-site that 11A. It might ruin my day.
Right.
It's like, no. Like, if it's ruining your day, we need to get better at your confidence while on-siting and just your confidence in general while climbing. Yeah. Not even just on-siting. Like, this isn't going to ruin anything. I remember Sasha Julian years ago was climbing in Spain, and she had a day where just a single day, I want to say she on-sited like 2 13Cs, sent a 14B, and then on-sited a 13D and red pointed a 13B after.
Right.
And I was like, who even tries that? Who? Like, let's take a number off of all of those and put me in her shoes. I'm not trying that many things. Like,
right.
I don't even remember what it was, but it was something just absurd like that. Like, wait, you on-sited hard, then you went to your project and you did your project, and then you like did a second project, and then you went and on-sited afterwards because that wasn't enough.
Right.
Like, and then you second go send another, a moderate 8A afterwards. But yeah,
it's not a coincidence that these people are the best climbers and they're engaging in things this way.
Yeah.
If you're a person who's stuck in I only on-site or I only project, maybe look around and see that all of the best climbers are making all of the different types of approaches.
Yeah. And look outside of your close community too.
Yeah.
Like, good example, I went to Rifle the first time I ever went. It was actually 8 years ago. I hurt a finger here, pulling on pockets, went to Rifle and found I could climb like 512 without much pain. And there weren't pockets there, so it was helpful. And I think I climbed like 35 512s. I was there for just a couple weeks, but I was just was like, I'm going to try an on-site 512 here. Like really went after it. And if not, I'm going to do it in a few goes. And I want to climb as much as possible, really learn this style. And it blew me away. At the end of my trip, I was talking with some locals who, had been climbing there 10 plus years, like some much longer. And they're asking me what I was climbing on. And for some of them, I had climbed more 512s in my first trip in like 3 weeks. They had climbed, they had climbed a few when they first were 512 climbers. And then they immediately jumped to projecting 513.
Right.
But they were like, oh, I haven't done any of those. Like, it blew me away. I was like, well, you're surrounded by amazing climbs. Do all of them. Like, I know people here project, but there's so much to do and learn from.
Yeah, this type of approach where you're mixing it up like this, there's a push toward don't pay attention to building a pyramid or whatever. This type of approach is going to make you a better climber, and it's going to just add to your pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't have to build a pyramid brick by brick perfectly, but ultimately, if you're climbing 13A or whatever, don't you want to have climbed 12D and 12C and 12B? You don't have to do them all in order, but it doesn't mean you can't go back and add in the ones below that you skipped over or didn't do. And why would you not want to do more rock climbs? I don't quite understand the concept.
Rock climbing's fun. Do it all. And that's that's half the reason I would say that I have this as my biggest mistake. Because, man, it's fun. What a way to get to experience rock climbing. And I know people say that multi-season long projects where you measure not in goes, but in the number of ropes that you used to send it. I'm sure that's fun for some people.
Yeah.
But, man, this is really cool.
Yeah. I'll also add this in. We love to, and you and I just talked about this on a patron board meeting. We love to look at the outliers and use them as the examples, or excuses to not engage with a thing in a certain way. And I can just hear all of the on-siters and all of the people against projecting being like, well, Alex Megos didn't have big projects, until he was climbing 15C.
That's a good point.
Well, you're not climbing 15C, but you have been stuck at 13A for a long time. Or 12A or whatever you're at, you've been stuck there a long time. You're not Alex Megos. Mm-hmm. And Alex Megos had the benefit of growing up in an area that had thousands of rock climbs 514 and harder. So as he's approaching his upper grades, he's got his pick of anything. Most of us don't have that luxury. We've got a few routes that are harder for us, that make the next logical step for us. So always just on-siting, always just doing mini projects, you're going to run out of things pretty quickly. He had the benefit of not having to project because there were always things at the level he was at, and he could make, relatively slow progress through the grades.
Yeah. I forget what it was. We looked, was it 8C and harder? There were like 600 plus.
Yeah, some absurd number.
Yeah, whatever it was I can't remember, but insane. Maybe it was 8B. Maybe that was 13D and up was 600.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah. I think that might have been it. But whatever it was like, coming from the red, where when I started climbing there were 2 13Ds. One I'd never seen chalk on.
Right. Exactly.
I think he actually sent his first 9A in like 4 tries or something.
Right.
14D.
Right.
But it's because he was able to climb so many of these other things first. And if you have the opportunity, do it. But I will say this, let's draw this back around. When he did have to start projecting, he spent years really getting flustered and having a lot of issues with it. And I thought it was actually really cool that he was so public about it.
Same.
But he was like, man, I never got shut down before. Like, I got to do everything so quick that now that I'm actually projecting, this is frustrating. I get really upset. Like, this is a hard process for me. Both him and his coaches have talked about it. He's obviously an outlier in elite level, but it came around to him either way, not knowing how to project.
Yeah, totally. All right. Any more from you on there?
No, just do these things, do links, and have lots of methods of approach for your climbing days.
We'll put that in all caps in the Instagram post.
Yes.
And I will link right there in the show notes in your pocket supercomputer back to an episode with Alex Megos on the podcast and Ken Etzel, who made the film Rot Punked, and we talked a little about Alex's, challenges with feeling like he was enough, by trying this thing that was really hard for him and not sending quickly. I think it's really important to try all of these different methods of approach because it just prepares you for being a better overall climber later down the road. So check out that. You can find us at powercompanyclimbing.com. You can find us at Power Company Climbing on the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Pinterest, the YouTubes, and you can look for us on Twitter. We're not going to be there because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
We don't know.
This time, 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 power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power. 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 This time to build. 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 This time.
Cause Jah is the sinister character.
Structure audio.